If you follow us for a while, you know that we already created a Death and a Fury cosplay for the Darksiders 3 release in 2018, and we also traveled all around the world with the costumes. Last year THQ Nordic asked us again to bring one of their horsemen to life, this time from Darksiders Genesis, so we had the honor to create a Strife cosplay.
Because we always have such a full schedule, we did not have much time to finish everything, so we had about 4 weeks in total. And again, I was not only responsible for all the 3D modeling work, I was also the one who was supposed to wear the costume at several events. I already knew the struggle of wearing this kind of costume because it's quite similar to our Death cosplay from Darksiders, so I was kind of prepared of what was coming.
Strife has a very unique design. He has a lot of armor, these big guns, and he also has a very muscular body. He just looks super ripped. To realize this project, we went from 3D modeling to live casting, a lot of sculpting, 3D printing, painting, electronics, and more. I like to start with the part I'm most afraid of, and this time it was Strife's hair. He has a very interesting hairstyle, and to be honest, it looks more like spikes than hair. I wanted to make the hair and the spikes look exactly like on the in-game model, so instead of making a wig out of synthetic hair, I had another plan. So we made a live cast of Ralph's head. Having a live cast of your head can be very helpful when you create any type of helmets, headpieces, or even prosthetics. When you do this, it is wise to ask a friend or someone who you trust, because you're gonna be covered in silicone and plaster bandages for some time. And don't worry, of course the nose is still free, so Ralph was able to breathe. We've made a live cast of my head some time ago, so I know how good it feels when they cut open the mold and you're finally free again. We used a fast-curing stone plaster for the bust. This creates a very durable but also very heavy copy of yourself. Ralph 3D modeled a rough version of the hair, which we then printed, and I used it as base for sculpting. All spikes were then covered with an oil-based clay, attached to the head cast, and I defined the shape and added all the details. The plan was to cast the hair out of a flexible material for more comfort while wearing it. So I made a brush-on silicone mold with a fiberglass jacket to keep the silicone in shape. Because of the very complex design of the sculpt, I had to separate the shell in 5 pieces. So I spent some days only in creating the mold. Due to our very short time schedule, I don't have footage of the casting process. So here's the finished cast I made out of a semi-rigid resin. It is stiff enough to keep its shape, but it's still kind of flexible. So we went on working on the mask, which is the most iconic piece of the costume. We got the 3D files of the mask from our friend Ali, who also made an amazing war cosplay, by the way. Ralph prepared the mask for printing and managed it to separate it without having any visible seams. This makes the sanding process so much easier. After sanding comes painting, and I always enjoy this so much. It really brings the costume part you are working on since days or even weeks to life, and you start to get an idea how the costume will look at the end.
Most of the time when we're working on a big project like this, I'm mostly doing all the 3D modeling stuff, and I'm also responsible for all of our 3D printers. But one thing I also always do is the electronics, like adding LEDs and stuff like that. For Strife's glowing eyes, we laser cut and engraved pieces of acrylic glass. So the engraved surface breaks the light, and from the distance of just 1 meter you can't see the tiny dots anymore, and it looks like the whole eye is glowing. The reason why we did it like that was because we wanted me to be able to see through the eyes. As always, we worked with programmable LEDs so we could change the color.
First I was a bit afraid of working on the scarf because I just had no idea how to make it hold its shape like on the in-game model. I tried out different things, but in the end I basically just built a foam base covered with cotton wool as padding to create all the folds or wrinkles. I don't know if this is the correct word, but I hope you get an idea of what I mean. This was then covered with fabric and painted. The cape also needed to be very stiff to keep its shape, so I added several layers of a stiff interlining between the fabrics. At this time I was so busy with other parts of the costume that our friend Florence visited us and finished the cape for me. She cut the edges and also added some weathering and shading. She's also a super talented and dedicated cosplayer, and this is not the first time she helped us when we were running out of time. We did a test fit with the scarf, the hair and the mask, and we were so scared that the proportions would look weird because actually Strife has a quite small head. But when I saw it, I was so relieved how good it looked. The mask and the hair just had the perfect size, and I'm still so in love with his glowing eyes. For the upper body we decided to make something like a muscle suit, but out of silicone. We already did this for our death cosplay, but even when the process took super long and is also quite expensive, the amazing result is so worth it. What makes Strife upper body special? That all his abs, chest and also his muscles on his back seems to be out of a metallic material. To achieve this look, I wanted to combine a soft silicone body with 3D printed armor plates. I sculpted the whole upper body out of an oil-based clay and added the 3D printed muscle plates on top. The sculpting process took me about a week. It is really time consuming to sculpt such a big piece. Make everything symmetrical, clean up the surface, add details and so on. It just takes a lot of time. For the molding process, all the 3D printed pieces were removed and we started working on the mold. We started with some layers of different epoxy resins and also added fiberglass to the upper layers to get a strong and durable mold. Cracking open the mold always looks kind of brutal, but don't worry, it has to look exactly like that. I spent some time to mix the right color of the bodysuit and did some small test castings, but at the end I found the perfect color. I'm still not sure if this is supposed to be Strife's natural skin color or if he's wearing a black and gray bodysuit. But well, Death has light gray and blue skin, so I think dark gray skin is not that bad. Of course, the silicone suit still needed some shading to make it more realistic, and we also added all the metallic muscles, and I was so happy to see that everything worked out so great. Even if I have the perfect plan in my mind, it not always works out as I want. But luckily, this time it did.
You may ask yourself, how the hell did they manage to get this big project done in such a short time? Well, the answer is easy. We had our very personal workshop slave who was living for 3 weeks in our workshop and was sanding all armor parts for us day and night. Just kidding. Our friend Felix worked for us for 3 weeks and his job was mostly sanding, filling and priming all the 3D prints. This is a kind of boring and sometimes frustrating job, but well, someone has to do it. But no one said sanding also couldn't be fun. Felix did a really good job and stayed motivated till the end. I've already been through these weeks of sanding for other projects as well, and I know how exhausting it can be.
I always do my best in filming most of the costume process, but sometimes I'm just so stressed that I forget it. There are so many different tiny but also important things I don't have much footage of. Like the sewing process. And I also spent some time on the shoes, which has a very special shape. I took some jazz dance shoes and covered them with foam and fabric to give them a new shape. Every time I make shoes for cosplay, I use foam. It is quite easy to work with, it's flexible, and the most important thing, it's lightweight.
And after all this sanding process, finally comes the fun part. At least for Laura. Okay, spray painting is not as much fun as painting with a brush or an airbrush, and we also had to do a lot of masking. But it's just so super satisfying to see how the armor slowly comes to life.
After all parts got their base coat, I could start with the weathering. Weathering and adding shades is such an important step and always makes your costumes and props look so much better. It gives everything more depth and texture, and, well, it just looks more authentic. I always enjoy this process so much. I think the most fun I had with painting the weapons. These giant guns are just so cool, and Ralph did a great job with 3D modeling them. They were the last part of the costume that I painted, and at this point I finally could see the light at the end of the tunnel. I gave these guns all my dedication and love, and they just turned out so nice. And look how oversized they are, perfect for killing monsters. 4 crazy and super exhausting weeks, but so worth it. So here we have the finished costume. Ralph has already worn the costume at E3 in LA, at Gamescom in Cologne, at Igromir in Moscow, and we also took it with us to Holiday Matsuri in Orlando in December. So thank you so much THQ Nordic for your trust in us and our work.
And we also have to thank our friends who helped us during this project. Thanks to Flo for your awesome work on the cape, Kira, the masking master, Kamil, the paint booth guy, Sabrina for assisting Laura during the molding process, and last but not least, Felix and Lucas, our very own sanding slaves. And of course, big thanks to THQ Nordic for an awesome 2019. We can't wait for the next projects.